Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Ryan Holck. Ryan, excited to have you on the show.
Hey, super excited to be here. Thanks for the chance.
Yeah, absolutely. You're doing so many phenomenal things. So super excited to talk with you and hear so much and learn so much as well too. And of course, before we jump into the interview, I want to read a little bit more about Ryan so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And Ryan is a speaker, author, marketer, and brand messaging strategist. As the creator of the Distill Your Story framework, he guides brands to tell their story clearly so that they are memorable and referable. He specializes in helping brands identify their unique story, simplifying their messaging, and delivering it strategically both in person and online. Ryan combines storytelling principles with marketing principles to help brands be more memorable and referable. And he has helped personal brands, coaches, small family brick and mortar businesses, multi-million dollar green energy firms, and statewide nonprofits as well too. And one of the things that really stuck with me as I was reading a little bit more about Ryan and hearing about all the awesome things that he was doing, he had over 17 years of nonprofit work. And I think he went to a conference, and at that conference, one of the questions that really stuck with him is said, what if you put fear in the trunk and take it for a ride? And that's what I think
Yep.
planted one of those seeds for him to do all the awesome things that he's doing. And one of the things that really stuck with me is he says success doesn't come down to the size of the business or the solution it provides. It comes down to how simply they can explain the complex work that they do. So, Ryan, excited to
Yep.
have you on the show. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I am. Let's hit it.
Let's get it started then. So, to kind of kick everything off, since I know you're the guru at all this, let's rewind the clock, hear a little bit more on how you got
Okay.
started, what I call your CEO story.
Yeah. So as you already mentioned, I started in nonprofit space. I actually had this like crossroads moment going into college of going, do I do marketing and design or do I do music? Because
Mhm.
both have a creative bent, both give me a direction to have a creative outlet, and really to do some exciting things. So I chose at that moment to do music because that's where I had the most experience at the moment, and I got into that and realized I really enjoyed it, but there was like something missing in terms of a gap for us as a family, and we were getting ready to start a family, and I realized if I'm ever going to make a change, now's my opportunity. And so I jumped into I in while I was doing music, I kind of ended up taking on a lot of marketing roles in the positions that I was doing. And so I ended up making a transition into nonprofit because someone contacted me and said, we saw you do something for another organization. Could you come and do it for us? And we'll hire you just to do the marketing. You don't have to do the rest.
Nice.
And it opened a door for me to like really get in and go, hey, this is what I probably should have done to start with. And so now I've spent the last 20 years doing marketing, all kind of because there was this pivotal moment in my life where it was like, hey, I think there's a door open. Now's the time to walk through it. And so, as you said, I kind of started in nonprofit. My first 10 years of marketing experience were all in nonprofit. I had spent 7 years prior to that in some of college doing part time and full time work in the nonprofit space. And so there kind of was this culmination for me of I think I could impact a lot of organizations. I think I could help more than the one I'm sitting at the desk of every day. And so I got to a point, and I love that you found that story of what if you put fear in the trunk? Because I really was at this moment where it's like, what on earth do I do next? Like I've been doing this 10 years and I enjoy what I do, but I think there's something more. I think that I could help more than a single organization. I could come up with products and services that would allow me to have impact into a host of organizations or a host of small businesses, even. And so I decided we're going to launch an agency and really work at how could we help tell people's story better. So the nonprofits I worked in always had this tension of we have a lot of stories to tell, but we don't always focus our attention well. And so it really kind of started for me an opportunity to figure out my sweet spot isn't in design. My sweet spot, now I can do it and I can do web development and I do a lot of it, But my sweet spot is figuring out how do you tell someone's story well so it's repeatable. And once you figure out how to tell a story, then we figure out what marketing principles to tag onto it.
Nice. I definitely appreciate you, telling your story and your journey. It's so funny that I feel like, they say the worst pain is the pain of regret. And I love that you
Mm,
went down that marketing or that music route first. But it sounds like, as you were saying, you were dabbling and taking on
yep.
different opportunities. It was always kind of like that magnet pulling you back. And sometimes if you don't know what you should be doing, sometimes if you don't do what you're doing, it ends up drawing you back to where you should be anyways.
Very much so, very much so. And, it got to the point where, like, my girls didn't even know I was a musician. They're like, "Dad does marketing." They're like, "You do what? You" it was funny because I swung so far, once I got into that position. So, it is interesting how things have kinda progressed over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I imagine it can be, but I'm sure that music and just being able to kind of, we sometimes forget that even cultivating different aspects of our brain and our skills sometimes carry over. And I imagine the creativity, the thinking outside the box, probably all the things from music, while you're probably not, playing an instrument or anything for clients. I imagine that creativity and that thinking outside the box probably is something that comes up a lot.
Very much so, and it's actually part of what I love doing then is one of the greatest things about being a musician was working with creative teams who'd sit and, Disney calls it blue sky, where you'd have this, if there was nothing in the way and we could do anything we wanted and we didn't have to worry about what it cost, what could we dream of doing? Okay, now let's add some realism to it and figure out, what could actually be done in our context. And we had those opportunities as a musician, I did. And so it allowed some me then to walk into creative space and think about creative meetings differently. Like, let's
Mhm.
not think about the budget right now. Let's think about what do we want to accomplish? What does your business or nonprofit need to do? How can we dream of where you want to be? Then let's be realistic and figure out how to get there. But figuring out at that beginning, not starting with we have $150, how do we make it work? But dreaming in the process, whiteboarding it out, is really an element that I brought out of that creative musical side of working with teams and things.
Nice. I love that. And I feel like so many times when you start with the realistic, you end up not being able to kind of innovate and create. But I imagine when you start to dream, for lack of a better term, dream big, you start to think about those things, those limits actually become opportunities to probably tap into your creativity to get to where you want to be, probably in a different way than sometimes maybe other people are doing that have maybe more than $150 in that budget or whatever that might
Yeah,
be.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, no, and that's part of the amazing part of it is when you can have a conversation at that level, then business owners, their eyes open and they start thinking differently about how could we talk about our business? How could we grow our business? How can we get it in front of people? Um, just that it's a powerful moment to not always start with the budget dollar in mind, but really where you want to go as a business.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more. I know we touched on it a
Yeah.
little bit, of course, and hear how you work with and serve your clients. Could you take us through a little bit more on what that process looks like and how you're making that impact for the clients you work with?
Yeah. So it looks like a couple things. The biggest piece is that I find that a lot of really nonprofits have this, but I'm finding it more and more with the small businesses that I'm helping too, is that we need something done now. So I just got to have an email go out or I got to like have a social media ad or something. And I call it the ready, fire, aim principle. And it's
Mhm.
just, we're just shooting kind of marketing stuff all over and hoping something hits a target and that it works. And instead of starting with a whiteboard and what are we really trying to accomplish? And if we can work towards that goal, we're taking steps towards it, but it also means we could take repeated attempts to hit the same goal because we're going for the same direction every time. And so my process when it's in its entirety really starts with, Zoom call, whiteboard, who are we trying to reach? Where are we trying to go? What at the end of the day is the goals of this business or this nonprofit? What do we want to accomplish? okay, how do we talk about the 50 things we do in ways that are clear? And how do we share that story in a compact way so that it's portable enough that others could take it with them? That if I
Mhm.
repeat it to you and you hear it once or maybe a second time, you have enough of an idea of what we do as a business that you could go, if somebody said, I need this product or service, you could think, hey, I just talked to somebody about that.
Mhm.
And for so many businesses, we're so close to what we do every day, and we spend so much time focusing on the day-to-day details that we don't always realize that we're complicating the way we talk about our products and services. We're talking about the way we solve issues for people at higher levels than they're ready to understand, in a first immediate conversation. And so helping a business figure out, it's not that I wanna water down what we talk about, we just need to focus it so that those first conversations, especially where impressions are made or broken, are ones where people go, "Hey, this person understands me, they have a product or service that can help me. I wanna have a better conversation, I wanna find out how could they serve us well." That's the part I love, and that starts with a whiteboard and figuring out where are we going, and then what story do we need to tell, and how are we going to tell it super simply, and then how are we going to apply a strategic approach to getting that story out for people.
Nice. I love that first step, and I think it's such a powerful step because again, I think whenever you have goals or aspirations, you're like, okay, well, what strategies are we doing? What tools are we? I imagine you jump into that, but I imagine just like you said so well, you can be so close to the thing that you're doing that we can kind of overcomplicate those
Yeah.
things, and I think we forget about I think at least the true essence of communication, of conversation, of story. All those things is to be able to impart some knowledge and information to somebody else, and we're not necessarily
Hmm.
doing it for us as much as we are doing it for the person that's going to consume that. And I think if we start
Yeah.
to create more time, more space, and have like outside people that are able to like say, okay, I don't really understand this. Can you break this down more? I think that's when you
Yep.
start to get closer and closer to that, I imagine.
Yep. It totally is, and I think the way you just said it is powerful, and it's similar to a way that I say it is that while it's the marketing is about us, it's not for us.
Mhm.
And we have to make sure to get ourselves out of the way when we talk about our products and services, because it really is about serving a need that our customer has. And so we've got to talk about it in ways the customer will relate to it, not like it's us, giving our history of, the company and where we've been and why we think we're amazing. All those may be true, but the customer's not usually going to resonate with that portion of the story at all.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me, in a networking group I used to go to. One of the founders used to always say, "Everybody's listening to the same station, WIIFM. What's in it for me?" And I think
Yep.
once you start to realize that, you start to realize that again, it might be about us, but like you said so well, ends up being for them, for the consumers, potential clients, the cause, whatever it is that you're doing as an
Yeah.
organization or a business, so that you can make that impact and the level on a lot of degrees they were created for.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, what would you consider to be what I like to call your secret sauce? You might have already touched on this, could be for yourself, the
Yeah.
business, or a combination of both. But what do you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
I think the thing that sets me apart is the strategy first approach. Um, for so many years, I'd pick up the phone, someone would say, "I need this," and okay, I can do that for you. Well, the deliverables are great, but deliverables without a plan don't always move you towards the goal. And so what really sets me apart in kind of the process and the framework that I run through is that we start with the strategic of, where are we going, and we map it out before we start spending money on deliverables so that
Mhm.
we can focus all of our marketing attention and dollars, at things that are actually going to help us reach that goal in the long run.
Nice. I love that. It kinda I think there's an Abraham Lincoln, I believe, quote there. He talks about if I had, a number of time, I would measure 7 times and cut once rather than cut 10 times or something like that. I butchered it, I know, but the concept goes back to a lot of what I believe you said around the strategy and making sure that you are doing
Yep.
those things in the beginning before you start to roll up your sleeves and start doing all the things.
Yep. Yep. And it also makes sure that, especially when you've got budget constraints, that you're only doing the things that are the most important. And I end up, especially post COVID, serving a lot of small businesses who are doing, um, there's been some anomalies, but for the most part, who are doing 1 to 2 million or less a year in total
Mhm.
revenue. And so they're thinking about budget and expenses, especially on the marketing and communication side, messaging overall very differently than, say, a green energy firm that's doing 10 to 20 million a year because they're thinking about their marketing very differently. They've got margin there for marketing. So part of it then has been, how do you figure out, and on that smaller side that's more realistic with most small businesses in America, how are we going to do this right? How are we going to do this well and see enough success that it bumps our revenue, we get the right growth we need as a business, and that it's paying for itself essentially, and plus some, because obviously we need to be making money, or else marketing doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're aware of that when you're having those conversations. And I imagine that whether you have that 10 million or 1 million or less of whatever that budget is, I imagine that kind of start point or the way that you're having those conversations is probably very similar in that you are whiteboarding, you are listening, you are
Yep.
understanding all those things so that you can, of course, figure out, what tools are in the tool shed, so to speak, so that you can
Yeah,
use.
very much so. Very much so.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I truly appreciate that. And I wanted to switch gears a little bit. And I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So it could be like an
Okay.
Apple book or even a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
The most effective thing that I have done year over year in the last 10 years is be a part of masterminds with other people who are who have similar goals, whether they're in the same space or not, but who you are shoulder to shoulder moving forward, and who, when you hit a bump as a business leader, as a business owner, you call them and they know enough of your story and context to speak into your situation really quickly.
Mm.
And that has been, I got into one of those in the first 6 weeks of starting my own business, and I've done 3 or 4 different ones over the last 10 years of working for myself, and it has been the life changer. It's opened doors for me in terms of contacts. It's given me accessibility to others. It's given me accountability. And if there was anything I would say, man, find a way to be with peers. That's the way.
I love that.
And
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say, don't be afraid to have others doing something similar in that room as well. Um, the fear is to isolate ourselves. I don't want anybody who maybe does marketing adjacent or does website adjacent. But sometimes the best pushing I've got has been from people who are doing similar things, not identical, but similar things to me, who are like, I think you're looking at this wrong. What if you looked at it and all of a sudden I go, oh, I just solved the three problems that were in front of me because I changed my perspective. So,
Yeah, it's so funny you said that because I was gonna say to me that really speaks to like having that abundance mentality and understand there's
yeah,
definitely more opportunity out there than sometimes we even see where we can very much so be like, okay, I do this. This is kind of close to what I do, so we don't want it anywhere near. But what we're doing is we're robbing ourselves of the opportunity to first of all collaborate. So there might be
yeah,
referrals or opportunities where this is their sweet spot, not your sweet
yeah,
spot. But two, I love that you talked about that mastermind principle. Be able to have similar perspectives and conversations because they're in the same kind of world, but
yeah,
they're able to shine a light in sometimes ways that we can't see or don't see as well because sometimes we're literally doing it on a daily basis. So we sometimes miss
right.
those things.
Yep, very much so. Very much so.
Nice. So, what would you consider to be a little bit more of what I call a CEO nugget? So, this could be a little bit more word of wisdom or
Mhm.
piece of advice. I like to say it might be something you would tell your absolute favorite client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
So this is gonna seem maybe a little odd, but the absence of a clear story allows someone else to write the narrative for you. And I did it in my business for a number of years that I wasn't clear about who I was best to serve, what ways I was best to serve them. Because it was a quote unquote agency, there was lots of things we could do with for marketing, and we didn't focus on what was the best things for us to do for people and the way we could have the most impact. And I see that with a lot of other businesses is that we've got to find a way to be super clear on the story of who we are, how we serve others, and we've got to keep repeating that, because if we don't, the people outside start guessing at what we do, and the story becomes a story very different than what we actually want to share publicly.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that word. I'm gonna go back to that you mentioned before. You said the word portable, which really kind of stuck with me because I think once you hear the story and you're able to do that clearly and succinctly, it allows you to be able to, of course, be able to convey that to other people, but also for those
Mhm.
people to be able to convey that to other people, and so on and so forth. It starts to create that snowballing effect. But that's something that's extremely powerful.
Yeah. Yep. Makes a huge difference because it is a snowball. I mean, it once you get it moving, then you've got some momentum behind it, and that changes things dramatically.
Yeah, and I think that it can sometimes be a lost opportunity, which is why I love the work that you do. When you don't do that yourself, or you maybe don't do that in a portable and succinct and clear way, where if somebody hears what you do, they automatically can create a story about what you do. But that again is because we haven't, I guess, for lack of a better term, rolled up our sleeves and done the work to get to simple so that we can communicate that.
Yes, and that is exactly it, and getting to simple is the hardest part of the work. And it's difficult to do when you are inside the bottle looking out. You're, like, trying to do it for yourself and going, "I feel like I'm stuck inside, I'm trying to read the label from the inside of the bottle," and it's an ideal place for us to have someone else to give that outside perspective, because oftentimes it's not that we are very far away from what needs to be said, we just need someone outside of the circle of the everyday work to say, as an outsider, these three things stand out to me. I think this is what you're trying to say. Is that accurate? Yes. Does that accurately speak about your business? I think it does. Okay, now let's amplify that. Let's find ways to repeat that. Let's find ways to amplify it. But oftentimes, I mean, I've had people in sessions say, you just helped me with something I've spent 3 years trying to figure out, and this was a 20-minute talk.
Mhm.
Only because I pointed out 2 or 3 things that made them go, "Oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. I overthought that. I truly do need to talk about these areas of my business at volume, and it will make a difference." So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely don't want to gloss over the fact that you know, a lot of times that's why you get people that are they you tap into other people's secret sauces. And the fact that you had so much experience, knowledge, and all of that, while it might have been a 20-minute conversation, I imagine all the expertise and knowledge that you've accrued wasn't probably in 20 minutes. So being able to kind of
right.
tap into other people that's their lane, that's the race they run, that's what they're great at. We have to be kind of open to being able to do that.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, and there's a Steve Jobs quote, and I don't know if you have heard it, but it kind of reminded me so much of that. Where I think he says something along the lines of that you have to work at getting to simple, and a lot of times people think that simple is something that happens, overnight, but it's something that you have to continue to, like you said, that repetition word really stuck with me of just continue to kind of sharpen this salt, sharpen more and
Mhm.
sharpen more. How can we get simpler? How can we get more precise and continue to do that? We forget that that's not something you come out of the gates with; it's something that happens over the time.
It is something that happens over time, and a lot of the time, it's something that we have to iterate on. That
Mm.
it's, "Let's come up with something and let's put it out in front of our ideal customer. Let's start talking to clients about it. Does it resonate with them? Is the idea right, but the verbiage doesn't quite land? Do we just need to say it different? Can we say it in, half of the words, or is there a way to be more clear about it? And sometimes that iteration is something that scares us as business owners. We're like, we have to figure this out today. We have to
Mhm.
know today. And the interesting thing is, if you look at giant brands, you said Apple with Steve Jobs, you look at Apple
Mhm.
and how Apple tears down and talks about their products and who they're speaking to, how they build their websites. You look at like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and while the core product has not changed, they have taken all sorts of angles to talk about it over the years and figure out, what are ways we could still point to the same product, but maybe change the messaging a little bit. And so we've got to remember that's okay in a small business. What we've got to know is what the core product and service is and where we're leading people, so that as we iterate on, what is the phrase to support it right now? What is the way in this season to talk about this, so that we've got the repetition there and people begin to realize, oh yeah, they have the product or solution for this problem.
Yeah, it ends up being so big to be able to kind of communicate that. And I always say, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, doesn't make a sound. If you have a really great product or service, but you're not getting that story out there, people aren't understanding it, they aren't marketing and getting that visibility. Are you really making the impact that you couldn't make? So it kind of sounds like that's very similar.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I wanted to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it
Okay.
means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So, Ryan,
Mm.
what does being a CEO mean to you?
For me, I got into this because I wanted impact beyond one organization. And for me, being a CEO has meant the opportunity to dream and have a wider impact in the world as a whole, to see more people's lives changed as a result of some work or action that I could sit at a desk and move towards each day.
Nice. I love that, and that impact word is so huge, and we sometimes don't realize that by the work that we do and stay in our lane, being really great at the thing that we do, our craft, whatever that might be. Not only does it a lot of times help us out, help our organizations out, our businesses, whatever that might be, but by doing that, it creates that snowball effect that we talked about. You start to impact, these organizations. These organizations impact their clients and customers, and businesses get to make an impact within their community. So all these things just start to happen as a result of us being true to our zone of genius and making that
Mhm.
impact.
Yep. I love the word zone of genius, and that's something that I've gone through even recently in a mastermind of if you had to talk about your zone, like how are you talking about it? How are you leaning into it? Because I think that's a powerful principle from the CEO standpoint of how do you have more impact and how do you spend your days being as effective as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said so well in the nugget, that's also so important to make sure that we can also iterate that according to our journey and where our businesses
Mhm.
are and how they grow and flow and everything in between. So, Ryan, truly appreciate that definition. And of course, I appreciate your time even more. So, what I
Of
want to do
course.
now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's
Okay.
anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best people can get hold of you, find out about all the awesome things that you're working on.
Okay. So just last idea, big idea, is that your competitive advantage isn't the tasks you do, it's the outcomes you provide. And that is what's going to set you apart as a business, as a brand, is when you can find a way in your marketing, your messaging, to talk about the wins that you provide for people, not just the tasks you do in the day to day, because we tend to sell the tasks rather than the outcomes. And if we can talk about the outcomes we provide, it changes the conversation with people. And I think that's so important for us as business owners, business leaders. In terms of connecting with me, there's a couple places. The website is distillyourstory.com. That's the best place to find information about connecting with me, about the work, about the process. You can see examples there of past projects. There is a opt-in for a website audit that would help you if you are thinking about your business and looking at your website and going, I don't feel like we're getting the traffic we're looking for. There seems to be a gap in people's understanding of our products and services online. It's a 10-minute DIY for you to assess, are we clearly talking about our business? Are we clearly talking about how we solve problems for the world? And give you an idea of what's next, how you can do that in 10 minutes. So that's a great way for you to even just kind of check out a freebie from me. So those are really the best ways you can follow me on social. At I am Ryan Holck at Facebook, and that's probably the best way to find me. And so, yeah, those are the best.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Ryan. We'll definitely have the links and information in the show notes as well too, so that everybody can follow up with you. But I love that last point that you kind of left us with. I feel like that wraps a phenomenal bow on everything that you do and all the awesome things, because I think so many times we can get so caught up into I do X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C, but we forget kind of melding in and developing and talking a lot more around the impact that we make of like why we're doing it, what
Yeah.
impact are we truly making in the lives, the businesses, the community, whatever that is. And the more that we're able to communicate that, the more that we're able to not just, I guess, get the client, but get the client to understand what it is that we do, how we do it, and what really sets us apart and is our secret sauce. So thank you so much for doing that, my friend. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Hey, you as well. Thanks again for the opportunity.